Good morning once again. This is our last class in historical books that we are recording, and it involves the Book of Esther. And I'm excited about this book, and this is an interesting book. I find it to be interesting, and I know it's a book that a lot of girls like because it involves a female hero, and uh, but there's so much about the Book of Esther that is just absolutely fascinating, and some very important lessons that is found within the Book of Esther. And as I've stated before, I wish I could delve into the depths of the Book of Esther, but I can't, and I'm going to touch the highlights. But this is a book worth studying. Even if you're not a female, if you're a male, you need to study this book. I know some of you may not like the love scenes or the love spots of it, but there's things in there that are very, very important. And so let's begin looking into the Book of Esther this morning once again. The Book of Esther is a well-told story of the dramatic deliverance of the Jews that took place during the Persian period. This drama unfolds with considerable intensity and affirms throughout that God is in control of this world and that he cares for his people. And in our world today, when things seem so out of control, this book brings to our minds a reality that God is still in control. Even in the worst of times, God is still in control. And so remember that. And he cares for his people. Esther was a Jewish orphan maiden who lived with her cousin Mordecai. Now, I know the Bible, the King James says her uncle, but it was actually her cousin. Her mom and dad were apparently killed in a raid of some sort, and so she lived with her cousin Mordecai in Susha or Shushan, the principal city of the Persian kingdom. The name Esther may have been derived from the Persian word for star. Esther is not her Hebrew name. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah, which means myrtle. Now, you think, myrtle? That's not really a beautiful, but the word, the myrtle bush, that from which this name comes, had a very beautiful flower that was just, when it bloomed, it was absolutely stunningly beautiful. So from both of her names of Esther Star and Hadassah, her Hebrew name, uh, it tells us that Esther was a very beautiful lady. And the book of Esther only verifies that. Jensen quotes a writer who notes that Esther is the only other book in the Bible named after a woman. Remember, the other one was Ruth. The writer goes on to state Ruth was a Gentile woman who married a Jew, while Esther was a Jewish woman who married a Gentile. And again, not by her choice, but that's what happened. The story of Esther reveals a woman of very commendable character. Among her traits were genuine piety, faith, courage, patriotism, compassion, maturity, and natural charm. Thus begins the story of Esther, the Jewish queen in a pagan court. The story of Esther provided the only biblical portrait of the vast majority of Jews who chose to remain in Persia rather than to return to Palestine after the exile. God's hand of providence and protection on behalf of his people is evident throughout the book. though his name does not appear once in the book. And to be absolutely honest with you, that gave Martin Luther, the great reformer, great concern. In fact, he said the Book of Esther was almost heresy and should not be in the Bible because it did not mention the name of God. Although God is not mentioned, his activity is seen all through the Book of Esther. Some important facts about Esther. The background: the Book of Esther is named after its main character, Esther. The author uh, is Esther or Mordecai. It is believed by Jewish tradition that they wrote the books. However, it cannot be proved with absolute proof. So it just doesn't. We say Esther and Mordecai, but technically it's unknown and cannot be proven. The date of the writing was around 435 BC. The place of the writing was Susha or Sushan, the Persian capital. The Book of Esther is within the time frame of the reign of Xerxes from 486 to 464 BC. The geography of the book is that of Susha, the winter capital of the Persian Empire. The setting, the story of Esther, takes place under the reign of King Xerxes I, known in the Hebrew as Ahasuerus, who ruled over the Persian Empire from 486 to 464 BC. It also happened between chapters 6 and 7 of Ezra, is where chronologically this story takes place. The theme of the book of Esther is quite simple. It is divine protection. God protects his people from a very wicked man, Hagag, or Haman rather. The key facts of the book of Esther the key word is providence. Key verses is chapter 4, verse 14, and chapter 8, verse 17. The key chapter is chapter 8. This chapter records the pivotal event when the Jews were allowed to defend themselves and the turning of many of the people to the faith of the Jews. The key people is Esther, Mordecai, King Ahasuerus or Xerxes, and Haman, who is the villain in this story. Christ is seen in the book of Esther. Esther portrays Christ in two ways: by putting herself in the place of death for her people, and by being an advocate for her people. If you remember, she was not to go before the king unless summoned, but she did, putting herself in a possibility of being killed if he did not present to her the scepter. And then by being accepted, she was an advocate for the people. The contribution to the Bible: Ezra deals primarily with the restoration of the Jewish people after the exile. Nehemiah deals with their physical and spiritual reconstruction, and Esther deals with their preservation. Esther is more like a drama than any other portion of Scripture, with its unexpected and ironic plots and twists. Again, the outline of the book of Esther. Again, this is Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, A, B, A, B. You're welcome to use this information instead of digging out for your own. If you want to dig out for your own, that's fine. But you're welcome to use the information that I have given to you as well. So, let's begin to go through the book of Esther. And Esther is quite an interesting book. The book of Esther is the reign of the Persian king Darius was as successful as it was long. He established a workable system of government. He built splendid buildings, extensive roads, and even a canal in Egypt between the Nile River and the Red Sea. His only significant failure was his defeat in 490 BC in the Battle of Marathon, which halted his extended invasion of the Greek peninsula. Darius was succeeded by his son Xerxes I, who achieved significant lesser than his father. Xerxes, who is the king here, called Ahasuerus in the Bible, seemed content to rest on his father's laurels, except that he too tried to invade Greece and he was driven back. In the book of Esther, Ahasuerus is characterized as a weak and foolish king with no mind of his own. But the book is not really about Ahasuerus here. Um, like the narrative of Daniel 1 through 6, the book of Esther was meant to encourage Jews living in a foreign land. And so it really wasn't focusing on Xerxes. Um, but again, it does provide that. We see again that um, he is a weak and temperamental king. He provides a feast for his people. It's a grand feast, many, many weeks, and the king and his nobles are drunk. And he wanted his queen, Vashti, to come and present herself. Now, again, this, and I want to be careful because I want to be as tactful as possible. It wasn't the fact that he wanted Vashti to simply waltz into the banqueting hall before the men and him to say, "Look at my beautiful queen. How beautiful is she?" And, "Oh, she's the fairest of all the ladies in the land of Persia." That's not what he wanted. Because I believe if that was really the purpose of Xerxes, I think Vashti would have done it. From all indication, if you study into this, from all indication, um, Xerxes wanted Vashti to come and perform immoral dance that would involve a disrobing of herself, whether it would be a complete disrobing or not, but revealing uh, the king in or the queen in some form of nudity, if I can put it that way. And Vashti, there's no way that she was going to go in and do that kind of thing to drunken men. And she said no. Well, you do not tell a Persian king no. But the king is so drunk that it appears that he got mad, but he really didn't do anything. And the nobles realized what happened, and they said, "Wow, if the queen is not punished, then our wives are going to stand up and tell us no, and we're going to be in trouble." And back in those times, you didn't tell your husband no, no matter how mean he was or whatever. You just didn't do that. And so they went before the queen, the king, and said, "Listen, you need to get rid of Vashti because she has created a major problem with no thought of their request of her being immoral and uh, the whole scheme of it. We don't want our wives to tell us no." And so uh, the king dethrones Vashti. Now, Vashti is not killed. She is dethroned from being the queen. She is basically becomes one of the concubines, uh, wives, yes, but she lives in the house of all of the king's wives and his concubines, and basically she's going to live out the rest of her life um, in in-house arrest. Now, history tells us that later on, the king bans Esther to the house and reinstates Vashti according to Persian history. But she Vashti is vanquished, and so um, and everything is great. But then the king is missing his beautiful wife, and he is wanting um, a wife, and so the ladies, the nobleman said, we've got to do something because he's going to put Vashti back on the throne, and it's only going to complicate our problems. And so uh, they devised a plan of getting all of the beautiful virgins of the land to come, and each one of them would go into the king, and from that time with the king, he would choose a new queen. And we know the story, but let me just help us understand this, because sometimes we think, oh, isn't this just a wonderful fairy tale? They rounded up girls that, I mean, there may have been some girls that wanted to go, but some probably didn't, and they took them regardless. Um, if they met the qualifications, they took them. And what we must understand here with this whole situation is, once they went into the king's, were taken into the king's house, they were considered his concubines. They were never allowed to marry. They were never allowed to be given to anyone else. Um, they were considered property of the king. So even if they were not the queen, and he married them, they would never know, having a family, a husband. They were property of the king, and quite frankly, could be used. I'm going to even say abused in that setting, without no thought of anything. And so it was a very, very difficult thing, and no wonder some of the ladies did not want to go. Yeah, it would be wonderful if you were chosen, but there was several ladies. It wasn't like 10. It was a lot, and they went through a period of purification, and the fellow that was over the ladies, to make sure that everything was carried out, favored Esther because she was so beautiful. And when they went to spend their time with the king, um, they could dress whatever they wanted. They could go into the treasure house and adorn themselves with jewels and whatever, to try to impress the king. And Esther, when it was her time to go, basically asked the head of the ladies and said, what would you recommend? And her natural beauty was so great that it was very little, and she went in, and we know the story. It was God's providence, the key verse. Esther was chosen as the queen. But Mordecai strongly encouraged Esther not to reveal her heritage, her lineage. And so the king married her without knowing her nationality. And Mordecai would sit at the gate. He was Esther's famous guardian, and I misspelt that. I see that on the PowerPoint there. I apologize. He sat there to make sure things were going right. And it was while he was sitting at the gates, to get word, and Esther would send out servants to tell him what was happening, so that he would, that he would know. He was also a scribe for the king, And it was while he was sitting at the gates that Haman, or that Mordecai, overhears two of the guards that was plotting to kill Xerxes. And he sends word to Esther, and Esther gives word to the king, and the king searches it out, finds out that it is true, and it is recorded in his chronicles. But nothing is done for Mordecai. And Haman has been exalted now to a high position. He has been made what we would call today like the prime minister. He's second in command to the king. And Haman goes out and people are to bow, but Mordecai is still at the gates, and every time of the palace, and every time Haman goes out, everybody bows but Mordecai, and he finds out that Mordecai is a Jew, and Haman hates the Jews, and it only increases his hatred, and he devises a plot to destroy the Jews. Um, he excites the people, gets the king to um, pass this law. And what is interesting, um, that Haman is an Agite. Now, if you read commentaries, uh, commentators are split on this, but some feel very strongly that Haman was a descendant of King Agag, whom Saul was to kill. Remember, he didn't. He saved him. Samuel killed him, but apparently he didn't kill his wives or whatever, and some of his sons escaped, because some scholars believe that that Haman was a descendant from King Agag and carried that bitterness, that hatred of the Jews for almost wiping out. And although King Saul was to completely wipe out, he didn't. But they never became a nation again, a people again. They were still a people, but I mean a nation, a strong kingdom type of a deal. And maybe it was that Haman hated the Jews, and so we also find here that um, the city of Susha was a great city, and it was uh, just a phenomenal capital. And so we see that Haman is going to destroy the Jews. And Mordecai and the Jews began to pray, and Mordecai says, Esther, it is time for you to reveal your nationality and go before the king and stand in the gap for your people. And Esther says, but Mordecai, you don't understand. The king has not even called for me for 30 days, a whole month. He hasn't seen his wife. And she said, I can't just go in. And of course, Mordecai gives that um, wonderful challenge to Queen Esther, that you were brought into the kingdom for such a time as this. And and it was it was great, that saying, and you were I see it here. It says, for who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And so Esther says, all right, you pray and fast for 3 days, I'll pray and fast for 3 days, and I'll go before the king. If I perish, I perish. and they fasted. And Esther goes before the king, and the king um, holds out the scepter to her, and she, knowing the king, she doesn't just say, "Here's my request." She invites him to a banquet. She knows that the way to a man's heart is through his belly. That is the way it happens. So uh, and so she invites him to a banquet, but she invites Haman, and Haman is now just at the height of his glory. He is going to a banquet that's just for him and the king by the queen, and oh, he's just so happy. But Mordecai won't bow to him, and he is so upset. And so he has gallows built that he's going to hang Mordecai. He is going to petition the king, and he's going to have Mordecai hung before the day when they're killing the Jews. But the problem is, God is working. Providence. Remember the key word? God is working. The king can't sleep that night, and so trying to go to sleep, he says, "Bring me some chronicles." And the chronicles of the kings were basically just data entry. Um, on such and such a day, Mordecai, it was known that Mordecai discovered a plot to kill the king by and naming the people. And if something was done, Mordecai was honored by this. It was very boring. Some of you, if you've tried to read some theology when you're younger, theology books, you understand the kind of reading it is. It gets technical, and your mind and it puts you to sleep. Some of scripture and the begat parts of it. So and so begat so and so, and he lived so many years and he died, and so begat so and so. And after a point, you don't care who begat so and so and that they died. It's no big deal, and your mind begins to wonder. You get tired. This is what the king was trying to do. He was trying to go to sleep, and he comes across the reading that Mordecai had made known a plot to kill the king. And instead of his mind going to sleep, King says, "What was done for this man?" "Nothing, my lord." "Well, then we need to honor him, and I'm going to honor him tomorrow morning." And so Haman comes in, and the king says, now remember, Haman comes in because he's going to ask the king if he can hang Mordecai. And the king says, "What should the king do to a man that the king honors?" And Mordecai or Haman rather, is so full of himself. He thinks it's him. So he says, I would have him ride on the king's horse. I would have him dressed in the king's robe, and I would have the king's crown put on his head, and one of the highest noblemen to walk before and lead the horse and proclaim that everyone should bow before this person, and this is what happens to the person that the king honors. And wow, uh, Mordecai, the king says, "That's a great idea. You go and do this to Mordecai." Oh, that just killed Mordecai, or that killed Haman, because he wanted Mordecai dead, and he was the one that had to leave. Now, prior to this, the queen had prepared a feast, and so they'd already gone to the first feast. And the king says, "I'll give you half of my kingdom." And Esther said, "Just come back tomorrow to another banquet, and I will tell you my request." And so now the next day has come, and Haman has to lead Mordecai through the city proclaiming, and he is disgusted. He is upset. Word comes to Haman that the banquet is ready, and he goes, and he's trying to figure out what's going to happen. And they eat, and the king says, "Queen, tell me your petition." And she says, my people and I have a sentence of death on us. And the king says, who in the world has done such a thing? She says, my lord, your signature is on it, but it is devised by Haman. And then she reveals that she is a Jew. And the king blows his mind that he wasn't more perceptive, and it makes him mad, and he gets up and he walks out to the garden to clear his mind and to think about this, because he has signed the death warrant to his queen. Well, Haman is begging for his life, and in so doing he crawls up on the queen's couch that she's reclining in to eat. They didn't sit in chairs, they reclined on couches to eat, and he's pleading for his wife, for his life, when the king walks in, and the king thinks that he is assaulting her inappropriately, and it's done for Haman. And they put the hood over Haman's face. It's done. And someone says Haman has built gallows to hang Mordecai on this morning. And the king says, that's great. Take Haman and his whole house and hang him on the gallows. Kill them. The king gives Mordecai the position of Haman, gives Mordecai the house of Haman and all of his possessions. And the queen says, what are we going to do? And Mordecai, what are we going to do? Can you stop this? And the king says, I've signed the command. I can't go against my command. It will stand. But you can write a counter command that will then say that the Jews can fight. And so the Jews did. And they slayed many, many people. And the fear of God came upon the Gentiles till many of them started worshiping the Jewish God and fought for the Jews. And it was actually 2 days that they fought and killed. And today they have a feast of Purim that the Jews uh, still hold today as a celebration of and a praising of God for his deliverance from the devastation that was for them. That ends the book of Esther, and what a story! Again, there's so much you can talk about. You could do a study in Esther and talk about husband and wife relationship. The king was not mindful of his wife. You can talk about God's timing and how he places people for a particular purpose. There's all kinds of things you can do and talk about. And so again, I encourage you strongly to study the book of Esther. Once again, let me just remind you that this week's assignments are all due on December the 14th. December the 14th. Then the new assignment for that week, starting the 14th through the 17th, all of those assignments will be due on December the 17th. That's important. It must be turned in. Anything turned in after the 17th at 11:59 p.m. will get a 0. So I need all of your overview charts. I need all of your the projects that we have, that you have. In fact, let me just look at this um, and tell you, give you the projects. If you go to the syllabus, um, it should tell you here. Um, Let me just make sure. Uh, all right. The projects that are due. There we go. Final class project is the year-end class project will be a detailed timeline, a PowerPoint presentation, a research paper, a detailed chart, or a written play or short novel of a story. Um, Again, this needs to be, and I have given in the, as well, I have given in the files. Um, if you go to the files, you will see here some rubrics and some samples of the various things that you can do. And I'm looking at it, and I'm not seeing it real quick here, but there are samples. I will make sure they are there if not, but um, uh, you can look at some of these. I will make sure that there are samples up and the rubrics that we will go over. Um, and so remember that and look at that. I will make sure that is posted today, and you can be looking at that. Please, please, please pay attention to that and make sure that is done. All right. We will see you later, and thank you for your time and listening. And I have enjoyed having you in class. This will be the last video that you will see of me unless I give something describing a little bit more of uh, the end time or the end, um, yeah, final project, but it will be a short one. But thank you. I've enjoyed having you in class and appreciate all of your effort and hard work. Thank you.